Buddy, Bill Horton here. I'm gonna hit the full screen view and see if we can get this thing to open up. There you go. So this is the third in the summer series of trail walks together. Um, if you have missed them, I've done one on snakes early in the year, and then I did a trail walk in the early summer and the midsummer that are also posted on the website. You can find them through the links Andrew's provided. And this is the last one for the late summer. And again, just a reminder, um, I'm finishing up this certification for Blue Ridge Naturalist and would encourage anyone in the valley who's interested in either gardening or naturalist stuff or ecology or whatever. There's great opportunities through the North Carolina Arboretum and the UNC system to even just take a single online course or two. Easy to do. You don't have to be in the full-blown program if you don't want to, but you ought to check it out if you're interested. But anyway, today I thought we'd hit on a few things that I ran into poking around this last week. Monarch butterflies, and then this cool little plant, lobelia, that the monarchs might eat from. And then we're going to talk briefly about Lonesome Valley rocks and our precious cliffs here at Lonesome Valley, and then go underground for a second and talk about moles and some other cute critters we have. And then finally, I want to share with you, if you haven't seen it, a little bit about an Indian marker tree that we have here in the valley that's pretty exciting. So first of all, monarchs. Monarch butterflies are here, and this is pretty cool because they're moving in large part thanks to the new wildflower garden. Many of you, hopefully, have seen it. It's over by the trout pond in that open area. And of course, this is a 2 or 3 year project, but you're already seeing early blooms. And if you look right here in this little window, you'll see milkweed with a little critter in that milkweed flower. And what this is are the monarch caterpillars. So monarchs have a very unique life cycle and migration that we'll talk a little bit about. Is part of why everybody is kind of jazzed about them. Our garden is one of many areas, and you can plant stuff in your own house that'll help attract them, and I'll talk about that. But these creatures have seen about a 90% drop in their population over the last 30 years. And this is thought to be due primarily to loss of habitat or fragmentation of habitat, as well as the use of pesticides and herbicides. So, be aware of that when you're spraying around your house and stuff. But these creatures are very unique in the sense that they only eat the milkweed plant. This is one that I took a picture of over in our wildflower garden, munching on milkweed. And the monarchs can only lay their eggs on the milkweed plant as well. So if there's no milkweed, this creature will be gone. And then there's this crazy thing that they have. I never knew about this till I checked into it a little bit, but the males have this scent gland. So if you want to tell a boy from a girl, this is the boy over here. These little black spots are not just decorations. These are actually scent glands that they use to woo the girl. So that's pretty amazing. But the crazy thing that they do is in their life cycle. And so I want to just talk about this for a second. This thing at the bottom right here is a chrysalis that we found over around our house. But you're going to see them. And so here's how this goes. Let's start with the eggs here on a milkweed plant. They lay their eggs. The female obviously lays the eggs on the milkweed. And in just like 5 days, that thing pops out and a caterpillar appears. And that caterpillar is going to wander around on the milkweed plant for about 2 weeks, molting and growing and just eating and getting fat and storing up sugars and stuff. And then the caterpillar goes into this chrysalis stage, which I took a picture of one that we have. And this thing is amazing. It looks like it's got a gold bead around it. It's very beautiful. You can see my thumb here. It's only about the size of your fingernail, But they're going to live in this chrysalis stage for about 2 weeks, and then they're going to pop out, and out is going to emerge a full-blown butterfly. So this whole cycle, is just like 2 to 2.5, 3 weeks maximum to go from egg laying to the full butterfly. Now then the craziness continues, because as soon as the butterflies are born, they're only going to live a few weeks, 2 to 4 weeks maybe. And all they have time to do is find mates, feed on flowers, and lay eggs, and then they're going to die. And so during the course of a given spring and summer, there's going to be 3 or 4 or maybe even 5 generations of monarchs that turn over, leading into the fall. And that's where we are right now, is moving towards breeding the migratory generation. And this is the crazy part. So after all of these cycles during the spring and summer, the last generation that's born in the fall is going to actually migrate all the way to Mexico and overwinter there. So, every other generation lives a matter of a handful of weeks and they're gone. But the migratory generation lives much longer, which is crazy. And that only really happens in the eastern population. The ones that we have over here are the ones that go to Mexico. The others out west go to Southern California primarily. So after they overwinter, then when spring begins to show up, this creature has to cross the Gulf of Mexico and come back up for spring generations, and then they repopulate Lonesome Valley and all of North America in the next spring. So it's a really incredible life cycle, and we've got them right now down in the wildflower meadow, and you're going to see them around your house. So be watching for the fall migration group. Now, once they're born, they've got to go, as butterflies, they've got to go feed on all the flowers. And fortunately, Lonesome Valley's got a really good collection of fall blooming flowers. And this is a picture I took over on Farmhouse Road. Y'all know where that is, right down the street there from the Waghorns. And you see this tall blue stuff here. This is a plant called lobelia. And we're going to talk about this rock, and we're going to talk about the plant, because this rock is always wet. There's moisture going down it all the time. But this downy lobelia is native here in the North Carolina mountains. It's common. It really likes moist locations, just like that rock. So you'll see it around the edges of that rock. And it blooms in the late summer, which is exactly what the monarchs and other butterflies need. The lobelia is pollinated by bees, but it serves as a really critical food source for both hummingbirds and butterflies. So you may see either one of those creatures snooping around that rock when you're walking down Farmhouse Road. This stuff, don't eat it. It's mildly poisonous. It's not going to kill you, but it'll make you feel pretty sick. Now, if you're standing on Farmhouse looking back at that particular rock, so the downy lobelia is all up in here. You can see them very easily from the road. And in the spring, there's bluets that are blooming all up and down in here that you've probably noticed is really cool. But take a second and look at this rock for a minute, and let's talk about a couple of stories in Lonesome Valley Rock. And I want to focus on this left area here where you see this white banding, and then these little thin white bands, and then this one sharp diagonal line that's going up and down on this rock. So what is the deal here? So that diagonal band is what's called an igneous intrusion. It's basically a blob of what was hot molten rock that was injected up into a crack in this bigger rock millions of years ago. And what happened, if you look closely, you'll notice that the band actually moved. If you follow this big band over, you'll see it comes here and then it drops down, and then it goes like that. Or if you look at these little ones down here, they come across and then they jump up and go like that. So this little injection seam actually lifted this rock up and caused the whole thing to shift. The main big rock is a form of stuff called gneiss, which is, got these layers or stripes in it. And the gneiss comes from this intense heat and pressure onto granite. And so we've got both in Lonesome Valley, granite and gneiss. But here's sort of the goofy part to think about. If you're sitting in the valley and you're looking up at Cow Rock and Laurel Knob, a beautiful rainbow on a day, we're looking at plutons that formed like hundreds of millions of years ago, somewhere in the 2 to 400 million year ballpark. And the crazy thing to think about in our canyon is sort of geologic time. And I thought it'd be interesting to touch on this for 1 second. So um, if this little guy here is spreading out his arms, and the Big Bang happened right around in this ballpark, and we're going to consider geologic time from his fingertip all the way to the beginning of what we know theoretically is the Big Bang era around 5 billion years ago. So if you look more closely at this guy's arm and just look at this part of his arm down here, this is what you see on the bottom right. So dinosaurs basically occurred between the middle of his index finger out to the tip of his finger, and the human history is all sitting on his fingernail. And that's just kind of wild to think about if you consider this, that, time-wise, the scale of time that you're looking at here on these rocks, all of human history is out here on the tip of our fingernail, and virtually all of the tectonic collisions, there's a bunch of plate collisions that happen with continents smashing together and then rifting and coming apart. All that stuff happened basically during this era in the last sort of billion years. So they started happening in here, and particularly in our area around Appalachia. The biggest activities occurred in the last 400 or 500 million years. The oldest rock in North Carolina is over on Roan Mountain, which is 1.8 billion years old. But all of the stuff that happened with us that's really active mostly occurred just in this part of history here, out there in that little pitiful area. So our canyon walls are all metamorphic rock. So when you're looking up here, you're looking at what was a blob of like lava that never broke the surface and then cooled slowly and compressed it into a granite type material. And what used to cover this, all of this was covered with tons of more sedimentary kind of rock that has washed away. And you think about how can that possibly happen? But this is the amazing part. Erosion occurs at about a centimeter every 1,000 years. And a centimeter is like the length of your fingernail or something. So if you think about how long it took for this valley to erode down here, it just blows you away. So to realize when you're sitting in the bottom of the canyon at the pool and you're looking up at that Pluton, how many millions of years it took to erode all that material away and expose this plutonic mountain here so we could enjoy it and see it. It's really mind-blowing. So I thought you'd be interested in just sort of thinking about that and general erosion history. Now, obviously, erosion varies based on, rock porosity and chemistry and all that stuff. But this is a sort of a pretty good, just back of the napkin way to think about it that I thought you might find interesting related to our canyon. Now, if you go underground and stop looking at the macro picture of the mountains, you have this another kind of weird but cool event. All these creatures that run around underneath our soil, and we never see them, but this is all happening underneath you when you're playing frisbee golf in the meadow. Now there's billions of these funny little animals. There's the shrew that has a long nose and kind of whiskers. There's a vole that, is an actual rodent that has little gnawing teeth like rodents have. But I want to talk about the mole, which is a bigger animal than these other guys. He also has the pointy nose, but he's got these big front feet, these little things that look like almost like little claws that they use for digging. Now the moles are obviously not very attractive. They're not cute, but they are really important. and they're nocturnal. You're probably never going to see one unless you see it as a roadkill or something by accident, which I'll show you in a second. But they eat insects. So they love to eat worms. They eat grubs. We have this huge grub infestation out in the meadow. These guys are part of helping solve this problem. And they have these big front feet, these claws on their front feet that they use for digging. And the reason they're really important is moles are considered one of the main soil engineers. These guys, by their little tunnels and all the digging they do, they aerate and turn over the chemistry of the upper soil and are really important in allowing a much more diverse group of plants to thrive in the Lonesome Valley soils here. They don't eat roots or plants directly. Um, Again, they eat insects. They have this funny fur. It's very silky. What's weird about the fur is it doesn't have a grain or a direction because it allows them to turn around in their tight little burrows and tunnels. And you can hold them, they don't bite you and stuff like that. One of the crazy facts about moles that I never knew until I was learning a little bit about them, this is the kind we have in Lonesome Valley. This one, unfortunately, I found is a roadkill. You see his little claws and stuff. Probably got bumped at night. There's another form, we'll probably never see it, called this star-nosed mole, who has this wacky looking thing like a walrus or something. And this is a fancy electromagnetic sensor that these animals use to find worms. So they run around underground with this little sensor on looking for worms. So just, one of the amazing and crazy things in Mother Nature. Now, the last thing to talk about is a cool feature that we have over on the Laurel Knob Trail. This is the trail right here. This is a gigantic hemlock that has just recently broke off this spring that was almost for sure an old Indian marking tree. And I want to talk to you a little bit about this if you've noticed it. This thing is really big. And when you go by to look at how thick this part is where it was curved, it's impressive. So what's the scoop with these marking trees? Well, first of all, they're all over the United States. This is a marker from up in New England, 1740 range. And there's a lot of controversy, about whether these trees are naturally occurring or did humans create them. But there's definite a group of these trees that were created by Native Americans. The Cherokee and the Creek and the Choctaw were busy in this area of the world, particularly the Cherokee. But tribes all over the United States created these things. Almost all these trees are at least 200 or well over 225 years old. And so consequently, they're dying and falling down. This is a picture I took of our marking hemlock about 2 or 3 years ago before it collapsed. And this thing was a massive tree, but it was dead, obviously. Now, what they're for is they use them to mark important trails or major sites for water or treaty or meeting sites. They were typically part of the oral tradition that Indians had. They did not do a whole lot of, mapping and stuff like that. There was another one that was known up on Chimney Top Mountain just across 64 from us that recently collapsed and is now gone. But I want you to think about how cool it is that we have one here. So when trees get naturally bent by a storm or by something, the cambium, which is the nutritional layer right underneath the bark, here's the bark and this is the cambium, this stuff here, it ruptures under tension. So you see all these longitudinal fibers that just tear. And this is another tree here in the valley. Now, obviously, the marking trees were made out of saplings, but the problem is the same, which is the tension that's created on the cambium. So how did the Indians do this? To solve this problem, they created this thing called the hip and what we now call the convex vertical slit. So on the convex side of the bend, they would do a vertical slit in the tree to release the cambium and let it roll around the tree. So this is our marking tree that's broken off. And this is the hip, this little curved area at the top of the tree where the deepest cut was made. There's been a little bit of a rhododendron that's tried to seed into this now, if you look at it. But you can follow this slit, and it narrows all the way down here where I'm pointing at the base of the tree. And this is where you can see where the bark rolled around the cambium. Rolled around the inner bark of the tree and allowed the thing to begin to grow in a different way. And then they would use various ropes and tethers to rebend it. Now, how do you confirm the authenticity of one of these things? And what they would do is there are several ancient maps. This is a copy of a map from the 1730s. You'll notice Chattooga right here, Keowee, Seneca, And what you've got here is you've got major rivers that are denoted here. You've got known Indian trails or trading trails, and they would take these maps and then correlate them. These are all known major trails, and this is a map from kind of North Georgia. There's a similar one in North Carolina, but this is one that I had already from the U.S. Geological Survey of Indian trails. Um, and they would then take this and correlate them to known marking trees. So you can take these geologic survey maps and then start to form these series of marking trees that denote or map up to critical areas for either treaty locations or major trails and trading routes and stuff. So that's how these things have been documented, and it's really pretty cool that we have one, right here in Lonesome Valley. It's obviously going to rot and fall down sometime soon, but that's an overview of some interesting little critters that we found in the valley this time of year, and some senses of time scale, both the geologic time scale and something more cultural time scale with our marking trees that we have here in the valley. So I hope you've enjoyed it. Go out and roam around and check these things out, and I look forward to seeing everybody again soon, particularly when this silly virus will leave us alone. All right, take care.